Hello and welcome to today's edition of Extraordinary Outcomes. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. In our show today, we speak with Brish Van Vaidya, Head of Strategic Sourcing and Supply Chain Asia Pacific Uber. First up is our news roundup from the world of sales, SaaS, and startups in NS3. And finally, David Brock on the future of selling. Let's dive right in. First, the news in NS3.
In this bulletin, customer service leaders to spend on digital in 2021. Creatio plans big with low-code after $68 million raise. Outward Media releases SMB and medical market contact data. Personetics lands $75 million for AI-driven finance. 70% of customer service and support leaders plan to upgrade legacy contact center technology, transition to self-service channels, and bolster digital capabilities in 2021. Leaders plan to dedicate the largest portion of their budgets to migrating to digital channels and capabilities. A survey by Gartner revealed that automating customer service processes and making the functional transformation to self-service dominant organizations remains a top priority for customer service and support leaders in the year ahead. Boston-based Creatio received its first outside funding, a $68 million minority stake the company hopes to leverage in advancing its low-code vision. Creatio, a customer relationship and process management company, decided to raise capital after seeing rapid growth and high retention rate of 122%. Creatio's low-code platform is based on a business process management engine with marketing, sales, and services management applications built on top. The raise was led by growth equity firm Volition Capital with participation from Horizon Capital. Outward Media Incorporated announced that its small to mid-sized business and medical market data is now available on a leading marketplace that connects third-party data to more than 120 platforms in the MarTech industry. Outward Media is a leading provider of multi-channel marketing data with integrations that provide digital marketers with several advantages such as massive scale, defined and customized SOHO and SMB audiences, and a digital advertising engine. Data is anonymized to alleviate privacy concerns. Personetics, a provider of data-driven personalization and customer engagement tools for banks and financial services companies, announced that it raised $75 million in growth funding from Warburg Pincus. Previously, the company, which was founded in 2010 and has offices in London, New York, and Tel Aviv, had raised $83 million in venture funding. The company says its software reaches more than 95 million personal banking customers and analyzes billions of transactions daily. Thank you for watching. All links are also available in the show notes. If you have news about sales, SaaS, or your startup, share it with us at ns3@pitch.link. See you next time.
Meet Brish Van Vaidya, Head of Strategic Sourcing and Supply Chain Asia Pacific Uber. Brish Van is a certified sourcing, procurement, and source-to-pay leader with over 20 years of global experience across various industries and verticals. He has worked with global majors like Accenture, American Express, British Telecom, and is presently working with Uber. He has played roles in strategic sourcing, consulting, procurement transformation, and procurement operations. Brish Van has been awarded Procurement Leader of the Year by Institute of Supply Management in 2018. Enjoy this insightful discussion with Brish Van Vaidya.
Thanks, Shubhanjan. Thanks for inviting me.
The first basic question I have to ask is this: that buying process in organizations, how do you see that change in the last 20 years?
Great. So, I started my career in 2000, and that was the time in India there was not a single company which was using any sort of tools and applications for doing sourcing or procurement. Purchase orders were generally issued on either MS Word or over email or on Excel file. So that was the time, right? And I happened to be in the company which was in fact the first company in India to kind of start pitching the electronic commerce or B2B commerce solution to the procurement community. One of the first customer that was acquired that time was Maruti Udyog, and while they were interested to know what solution can help them, but they were seeing risk in their process. They were not fully confident whether it will work or not. So one of the work they gave to us was, while you are here to sell your solution which will help me in buying, but can
Yes.
you help me in selling my scrap? If you are able to get more price for my scrap, that will be a good testimonial that yes, the tool works. So that was quite a challenge because our tool that time was built for reverse auctions, but with some small configurations we could convert that to forward auctions, and we helped Maruti in selling their scrap out of Gurgaon. They were expecting approximately I think it was around 3.5 crore rupees for their scrap. And when this forward auction was done, we had to train the buyers, the regular buyer community that they had, that how they can see price increasing and how they can bid in the system. So we thought that auction will run for half an hour to 1 hour because people are not trained, so they will do the mistakes and all. But then we saw that enthusiasm between the buyers there. When they started bidding, the last bid we got was almost 2x than what Maruti had the kind of thought. So that was the first thing that I would say was one of the first event that happened, which was an introduction towards the tool and technique. So with that, things started changing in this sourcing community or buying community. The adoption of tools started happening. Initially it was for private organizations who started adopting it, but later sometime in 2004 and all, most of the governments in India or the PSUs, they also started adopting those kind of applications. So the basic shift was from a manual process to a system based process. It was sort of a digitization that I would say happened. And I still remember happened to work with the same company which deployed the first e-governance project in India for government of Andhra Pradesh, which actually was a result of one of the funding that they got from the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. The focus was that you have to bring transparency in your third party spend or buying process. So they were told that you have to deploy a tool. So it was a very complex project. Fortunate to be part of that. So government also got that visibility towards the transparency. And if you talk about today, it is mandatory for every state government, every PSU to have their major spend routed through an electronic mode. That is one shift I have seen, wherein there was nothing. Today everything is like mandatory even for government. And private organizations, especially the large organizations, multinational organizations, they have those tools available with them, which actually has automated their process, has given them a great visibility, and has helped in building a bigger relationship or a larger relationship with the suppliers. So technology shift is one, or you can say it's a digitization thing. Second, there was a tag given to a procurement person back in 1960s 70s, went up to 2000, wherein their idea was that sourcing person is actually a purchaser whose job is to go out and get the material for you. That's all. They don't add any value. It was considered to be an admin job. And in fact, I'm sure you will agree, a lot of jobs that were getting published many years ago, they used to call it administrative officer, and one of the role for the person was a procurement person or a purchaser, right? Now things have shifted from there, wherein from a normal transactional job it became slightly operational. Later, I would say in 2010 and beyond, it became a strategic sourcing or strategic procurement kind of a role, wherein this function started becoming an important part of the organization, defining how the spend should be done. Because spend is not just the money that you end up giving to a third party. It comes with a lot of asks and compliance also, especially for public company, because now you are spending money of someone who has invested in your company. So a lot of compliance angle come into that. Today, if we talk about where the procurement or sourcing has reached, it has become a part of the value chain. I won't say that this is happening in all the industries, all the companies, but yes, it has reached to a level wherein it is part of the value chain. And two things I would mention to support that. One, if you look at most of the aggregator model today, which is an app-based model, be it the car business or the electronic commerce business or any service that comes to your home with the press of a button on a phone, everything is supply chain. If you see, right, there is a platform, someone has to sell, someone has to buy. So that supply chain as a whole has picked up big time, wherein the value of sourcing, procurement, supply chain has become more and more stronger. And the other shift that has happened very recently is after COVID. And a lot of people are talking about how sourcing can help, because this was the time when everything was shut down. In most of the countries, companies were either operating partially or with a small fragmented space. So procurement or sourcing was one function which actually helped in running the organization by bringing that material or service, right? They were finding ways how to solve this. So that has changed fundamentally, you know, uh, the perception about, the sourcing process or the procurement process further. So this is how I see digitization is one. Second, the role evolvement that has happened from just, transactional to a very strategic, and then, the value chain. Then yes, we can talk about later, how the KPIs have changed, how, sourcing or procurement adds more value to the organization. But these are two fundamental shifts, I
Right.
would
So
say.
that P2P to S2P, the shift, that basic shift is
That's
what
right.
you're talking about,
That's
right?
right.
Okay.
Yes.
The role of procurement in the way it was defined is going to end, because negotiation is not going to be the prime driver, because in the physical world reducing the cost by a few pennies makes a difference in the ultimate, but in the digital world it doesn't really work that way. And that will sort of lead to a new kind of role and new kind of skill set. So where do you stand on that?
Most of the people still think procurement or sourcing, whatever you may say, in simple terms, sourcing is basically the upstream process in the overall cycle, wherein we go and search for suppliers, we do the pricing negotiations with them, we put contracts in place, and then hand it over further to the business or operations to manage. All those transactional activities like purchase order, supplier creation, that is actually procurement. So that differentiation has come very clearly now. Earlier, people used to say sourcing, procurement, purchasing, everything is same. No, it is not same. Everything is different. Now, coming on to your question, I still think that most of the salespeople, they think the role of procurement or sourcing is only to do the negotiation, and that is the only skill that they carry, which is not true. If you look at what comes in the job description of a sourcing person today, it asks for multiple kind of skills one should have. Negotiation definitely is the fundamental thing that has to be there. If you are not a good negotiator, you cannot fit into the role. Then you just become a transactional person and ideally should in the procurement function, right? So that is one thing. Now, along with that, other thing that is very, very important is how good a sourcing person is in doing the risk evaluation. When we talk about the risk evaluation, it is the financial risk, it's the commercial risk, it's the technical risk, operational risk, legal risk. All these risks need to be considered when a particular deal is being, evaluated. I mean, just getting a price from someone which is better than other does not help. The concept of total cost of ownership is something which does come into play, which a seller must know. And when it comes to the total cost of ownership, it is not just about what they are quoting makes a difference. They need to understand that there are a lot of other functions which are interconnected with each other, whose effort also need to be considered. Company strategy, policy, future plan also need to be considered in that. uh, you know I think the seller always think that the finance job is only to give budgets. No, their job is not just to give the budgets. Their job is to do the right allocation of the budget also and track that and match that whether the forecast is matching with what has been delivered or not. So there is a cost element or a functional element that comes into play. A seller has to understand that there is a cost of transition also, right, from one supplier to another. So if they think that the buyer is buying something at $100 and I can give 5% benefit to him, they need to realize to get that 5%, it should not happen that the buyer has to spend additional 10% because there is a transition cost.
Right.
I'll give a very simple example, and I'll talk about maybe ERP thing that you were mentioning earlier. There are multiple solutions, right? But is it really easy to change the ERP solution, right? Answer is no. One need to understand that it is not just the integration. First check is evaluating the supplier on their technical capability as well as how secure is the information with them. We have to think of the future plan. If as a buyer I know that my company will be switching from one platform to another platform in next 2 years, I need to see whether the seller is providing that sort of solution to me which is flexible enough. Is it 100% on cloud? Because if you are on cloud, definitely you have more leverage to make changes in your solution. How good is their code and flexibility in the code, right? If we ask them to make a change, does it come with a small cost, large cost? Can it be done quickly, or does it take time? Seller also need to understand, as a part of the cost of transition, is there a customer satisfaction also further getting impacted? And I'm not just talking about the customer within the organization. Organization also serves further other customers
Right.
also. Will there be a change in that? And then, what are the compliance guidelines for this? I take an example. I've seen it so many times. Someone would come to me for, selling maybe their marketing services or BTL services, below the line services, saying you are doing a ground level activation with, a partner. We know that you pay this particular amount to them. I can give you 2% discount. Now I tell them, see, I mean, to bring you on board, even if there is no major compliance risk I see, understand my, process that I have to change in my organization. They say, no, sir, you just have to sign a contract and we are okay with any terms and conditions that you have for contract. So we'll save your time. Fine. I mean, you are saving some time for me for contract signatures. But then I have to onboard you on my system also, right? For many people, they still think onboarding is like putting the name of the person and email ID and phone number. No, that is not. The team who's doing your onboarding, they also will evaluate you as a partner for the risk. Then the category under which I am putting you is also something which has to be evaluated. In my BTL, if I'm making a touch point between my customer and you, or if I'm sharing some data with you, I have a another function to evaluate you whether my data is secure with you or not. So there is a cost for everything that is there, right? So your 5% sometimes become a much bigger cost for me as a part of the transition. Today, the world has changed,
Right.
right? We represent an organization wherein multiple functions are connected with us, and we are there to balance the deal between the organization and the seller here. So
Right. Right.
that's how I see it.
Let's touch upon how the procurement process, the purchase process, the buying process is different when it is categories like marketing and it's technology. In technology, it's telecom versus software, professional services, and so on. So, if you can touch upon some of the industries that you have worked in and actually outline how the process differs between them.
Right. So I think the reason for having various categories and how the spend is actually categorized in the organization, because the approach varies. And your question is very, very right, that what is the difference? Yes, first of all, there is a difference how a technology procurement is done versus a professional category or professional services procured versus marketing. Everything has a different sort of customer base also, both internally and externally, who are the actual users of it. So when a procurement person is working on a particular project under a category, the set of questionnaire that they ask, the set of evaluation criteria they will put in for a supplier selection or a deal evaluation would definitely vary. Taking an example of, say, technology sourcing, whenever we talk about technology sourcing, in most of the cases, either the solution or the application will sit on the client system, or as we call it, on-premise solution, or it will be coming through cloud, which means there is a connect happening between the buyer's system as well as the seller system. And when we talk about technology, the biggest risk arise there, because now the seller would have access to buyer's system. So what kind of risks are there in terms of the security? Can they get into our system and hack it? On the other hand, is their platform good enough which will always remain up and running? If the platform goes down, is there a manual push someone has to do and inform the buying organization or the person in operation that our platform is down? Or is it smart enough which will generate? These are other things that are being looked upon in the technology. Then definitely the roadmap of the buying organization also has to be understood. Where is it that this company would like to be in next 5 years in terms of the technology? One of the example, I talk about my company, and we keep telling to the suppliers also, we are a zero asset company. The philosophy of the company is we don't want to build data centers, we don't want to have server racks in our premises, right? So if you are coming to us with a solution which might be economical, maybe 80-90% economical, but then you are telling me to change my complete IT infrastructure. No, that will not work. So that's how technology procurement is very, very different. The SLAs that would be there in the technology are generally about the uptime of the system and the resolution that you provide and the data security that you have, right? When it comes to marketing, we have to understand what are the KPIs and goals that a marketeer has, right? Their job is basically not to just build a brand, but to get more customers also, have a better customer engagement also. And that involves a lot of data sharing also sometimes, that here is my consumer base, can you build a strategy around that? So the type of risk now is not the technology risk, it's the data risk that is there. So the evaluation criteria would vary there, wherein we would be evaluating a marketing vendor, what is the construct of their organization, how do they share their data internally, what kind of exclusivity we can demand. And in fact, you will see a lot of times most of the advertisers will tell a marketeer, the team who's working on my brand building, make sure that they are exclusive and they don't work for any of my customer.
Right.
Then you have to look at what is the ROI that you are getting out of a campaign, who can deliver, and what is the experience of a person. Maybe in technology procurement, you don't care about who's the engineer who's supporting you, but in marketing deals, it actually matters who is the person assigned to your contract and what kind of campaigns this person has done in the past. That's where a lot of interview process also happens, that who's the person that will be assigning to my account. On the professional services side, it's a very different thing, right? Wherein most of the things around SLA, because in professional services, what we look at, what is the engagement that buying organization would have, or maybe the operations team would have once the deal is signed. Can we get some solution wherein we don't have to do a lot of transactional stuff? Can the partner or can the vendor provide a solution which is automated enough, has good dashboards, they have a good backend team who can do the resolution of services, and when are they compliant enough as per the government regulation? So the approach towards every single deal, varies. And that's where I would say that category model is something which most of the large organizations follow, because they want to build a strategy for the category, not just for one project.
Would you be able to talk about a vendor you were keen to work with but did not for some specific reason?
I'll give you one very recent example during COVID times, and when the COVID hit, sometime in the month of February, I would say, when business started seeing impact in our industry also, the volume of trips on the platform start going down, and suddenly government announced the lockdown. Now that's a situation wherein internally we were kind of deciding how do we kind of bring the rides back, how do we make our rides safe. So we were planning internally at our end, okay, can we look at putting sanitizers, can we have drivers wearing masks, can we put some kind of protection for these people, so that the trip becomes safer. So while we were doing this, a lot of products were thought of from our side also. So if you look at the safety screens which are put in, the cars today, every other company is talking about the safety screen today, right? We in fact were the first company, as far as I know, who put the first safety screen. That was on 21st of March. We actually tested that, product. And today, if I talk about, we have more than 125,000 installations done on our platform with the screens, right? So, what, why we are particularly working with a particular supplier? We spoke to a lot of suppliers, right? That we are looking at something like a screen which has to be put in the car. It was very easy for some suppliers who understood, the requirement, came very, very quickly to us saying, oh, let's do a, acrylic screen and put it in the car. you know uh, this will keep a driver, separate in the car, and your ride will be safe. So when we asked for the cost, they gave us a cost. um, we thought, okay, let's see what other suppliers are doing. In between, we saw a couple of suppliers coming to us who started talking to us very differently. They said, sir, you know if I keep this cost of a particular screen, and if it gets damaged, right, during the trip, you will have to replace it. Looking at where the country is going through, wherein the lockdown has happened, number of trips are low, you will keep investing on it every month, right? So can we give you an option which is a much economical option to put, so that even if there is a damage, you actually cover, bring that new product, and do that at a lower cost. Someone was actually thinking on the fare policy, how many trips would happen. So that is the kind of connect, sometimes the supplier, when they start reading or understanding your business and start developing product accordingly, that works, right? So that is one of the reason why, number of screens today are very, very high. We have the right partners who understand, uh, you know how it works. They actually spoke to the riders, they spoke to the drivers. While we were doing our own market research, they also, started talking to the actual users, that, the screen has been put, do you think this is safe enough, what can go wrong, what changes need to be done. On the other hand, someone was having their standard product and, was pushing for it. I have this product, this will last for 1 year. But they never realize that they have never spoken to the rider or driver who actually has to give a feedback. We are here to put safety in place and pay for it, but then if the end consumer is not happy, sorry, will not work.
Typically, by the time a buying intent is captured by some process, the buying process has moved significantly. So if you're looking at the buying cycle, out of 10-15 steps that are there for any buying decision, possibly the vendor gets a clue by the time the 8th or 10th step has already been taken internally. All your change management decisions, budgeting, allocation, and so on and so forth. So a lot of those things have happened. So my question to you is, how can a vendor get into this process early enough? It is not a guarantee for success, but how do they know that I can start working with the opportunity before the opportunity actually is crystallized and is out there in the open? Because that's when everybody is on it.
I would say, first of all, one need to understand that the sourcing philosophy, or the timelines for sourcing are changing for most of the organizations today. So it's not like that you will do the same sort of purchase every year, where the plan is fixed, that say in the month of January I will plan, that these are 20 or 30 projects I will be running, because the budgets have come, and in the month of March I'll be floating a tender. It doesn't work like that anymore, right? There are few reasons for that. Sourcing team, there, the KPIs are also changing now. Sourcing is thinking of doing sometimes, the multi-year deal also. So that concept of a project X will happen at a particular time only, no, that is not the case in all the organizations. Some organizations still have, that operational. So when does a vendor need to come? I would say, uh, it's actually on the sourcing team. Whenever they are planning a project, they go and start searching for, the suppliers that time, in case they want to add. So there is a fundamental shift that has happened. For a buyer, they can come and, present their capabilities at any given point in time as such, but then they have to understand that what are the priorities for this sourcing person or sourcing function or this organization, and when the next opportunity will come. you know Between that time, they ideally should keep studying or keep building that relationship with the buying organization by feeding them that what is changing at their end. That's how I typically see it. Sometimes it may be the right time when the supplier has come out and buyer is also planning to do something, and that's the perfect timing, but it may not work every time, right?
Right, right.
So that's how I see it. So yeah,
Yeah.
broadly that's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so when you talk of keeping in touch, so for example, if I have a software, I know I have built a software for the manufacturing industry, so I know my universe is of these 5,000 companies. So I sort of ensure that I'm in touch. It doesn't matter when the opportunity will arise, but I build rapport. What kind of value they can really bring to you? I mean, as the procurement head or a buying head, what would you really expect? I mean, the thing is that you can be inundated with material. There is no dearth of material. People are producing, ebooks and all kinds of stuff. And what kind of material would you welcome, and in what kind of periodicity? Because typically, I am sure Uber as an organization is dealing with several hundred, if not more, vendors in different stages. So it can be all kinds of things.
I would say, that's based on my personal experience, how I see it, because I am approached by a lot of suppliers on social platforms, sometimes, through some introductions and all, or through some forums, people will reach out. And most of the times I would give them the state of, what is our business doing right now? What are our expectations? And what is the current setup of, the product that they are trying to sell? So for me, someone who understands that yes, this is not the right time, right? That, but then they show their keenness to keep the buyer updated. That is what first of all creates a bond. I've seen people who will say, no, I mean, give us a try. They don't want to understand that this is not a priority for a procurement person. Also, they also have to deliver certain things. So first time, the relationship breaks there itself. After that, even if you communicate every day or once in a year, doesn't matter, right? That clearly shows that you only have your agenda. You don't want to understand our agenda.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, I've seen some great suppliers, some companies who understand that this is not the right time for this buyer or this organization to take your product or service. So whenever it would come, they will invite us, but then they will seek permission. Can I keep you updated once in a month or once in a quarter on the development at my end, and tell me how do you want to get it? That I believe is the perfect way that they will keep you updated. I have enough examples of that. One of the example, definitely I can't name the supplier. The discussion is on for last 2 years, right? I reached out to this company a couple of years back saying, I want a particular, sort of a product. I will not name the product because, that's something I should not be talking about.
Okay.
I said, I want this for my safety during a ride. They said, yeah, that's a wonderful ask that you have. So we have this product today. I said, but you don't have, few things in that. They said, give me, some time. I'll come back with this. So by the time they came back with that, our priorities changed. I told them, our priorities have changed. We will not be taking this service now. Maybe, in next financial year. Definitely, they tried to kind of, convince that at least you should do a pilot free of cost and all. I was like, I can't engage operations team in that. They understood it pretty well. They said, fine, we understand that you have your own priorities. Can I keep you updated, once in a quarter, what is happening at our end, maybe through an email? And if you want to discuss it, maybe we can set up a meeting. I can tell you, 2 years have passed. I get a quarterly update from them, and I've seen how they have changed their product offering from that time to today. And the best part there is they are studying where our organization is heading towards, right? And they are building those features on their own. They are saying, while you may not be taking this service maybe for another 1 year, but good that you actually gave us that view. We are able to sell it to some, other players in the market, right? So that sort of engagement is what a buyer also looks at. Is the company really interested in, investing in what you want? Whenever the deal might happen, that's fine, right? But they are investing. And the good part is they are acknowledging that we showed them some path which has taken their business beyond. So in their mind, they still, have that sort of, courtesy or respect that they have not taken, but then they are helping us somehow, right?
Right.
So that's what I would say. So once in a quarter kind of a thing, if there is a improvement in the product or if there is a variation, is a good way to communicate. If there's nothing that is changing, then I don't see you know
Yeah. Yeah.
any reasons why they should be in touch. Yeah,
Right. You designed a procurement profession development program.
I've done that a few years back. Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
So
Yeah.
so so if you want to update that program today, what are the key things that you will include into that?
One of the very, very important thing I do talk about is for a procurement person, till the time you have a sourcing acumen or a procurement acumen or a negotiation acumen, that's good to have. That will not be valuable to the company. You need to have that business acumen. So
Hmm.
today, if I have to redesign that, I'll talk a lot about 360-degree.
Hmm.
And under 360-degree is know what your sales organization is doing, what your finance is doing. Sitting in silos and just driving your agenda, that will not make you successful. That will not make your function successful. And that will not take your profession from what you are doing today. So 360-degree for sure. And I definitely have been practicing this. I work very, very closely with sales organization. So today they help me in driving my agenda. I help them in driving their agenda. One very simple example is if I know that I'm talking to a supplier at their management level or CXO level, can I pitch my company service to them? I just have to create that connect, right? The moment they say yes, we are ready to explore, then okay, connect the sales guy and that, right? And same way, I have seen our sales team also coming to me a couple of times wherein their prospective customers are saying, can you connect us to your sourcing people because we also want to become your supplier? That's what the true 360 is, driving the organization agenda than your own agenda.
Wonderful. That's a great note to end this chat. Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to talking to you again.
Sure. Thanks, Shubhanjan.
Meet Roger Mader, co-founder and managing partner of Ampersand, where he practices growth by design. From an early career on the launch teams for the IBM personal computer and first generation of Accenture's change management practice, Roger co-founded VIA International and built a global growth strategy, organization design, and change management consultancy. He guided strategy and new service design for Ernst & Young. He served as SVP Global Accounts in the consulting practice for Business Objects, now SAP, led global accounts for design strategy firm Dublin Monitor, now Deloitte, and led commercial strategy for innovation agency Fahrenheit 212, now Capgemini. He also served as the global chief marketing officer for Subway. Roger has been retained by CEO Trevor Haynes to craft brand purpose and architecture, reorganize the marketing function, elevate and integrate digital channels, and transform brand communication for the world's largest franchise restaurant enterprise.
Our job is to diagnose the pain and then to prescribe a solution. So if you step into this relationship with the unbiased desire to improve the health of your patient, that you are now no longer flogging the product that you sell. You are now diagnosing need. And now you're an expert in the particular product you sell, but if you were really their advocate, you might even send them to a competitor.
And finally, what is the future of selling? Well, Jim Smybert asked the exact same question to David Brock in Talking Sales.
If we go back to the way we started this conversation of what's the future of selling, and the answer to the future of selling is derived from answering the question of what's the future of buying.
Well, we have been saying the exact same thing in our own way. The future of selling is buying. That's a wrap for today. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay well and convert more.